What is up, guys? Another day, another dollar, and another Pickswise Playbook episode presented by Superbook Sports. Lauren Jabari here with Jared Smith, Tank Williams. Tank, week 11. This is my lucky number now. We're getting into the double digits. You love to see it. How was your weekend? Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, weekend was good. I mean, it's always a good weekend whenever you can watch some good ball. I won't mention my Stanford Cardinal because they always seem to disappoint me on Saturdays, but that's why we have NFL on Sundays.
That's why we go flip the page from Saturday to Sunday. 2-day weekend, baby. Jared, how was your weekend? Blazer man today.
Yeah, rocking the blazer. Hopefully these picks are laser focused. Looking dapper for you all here this week. Brush it off.
Yeah, we love it. Absolutely love to see it. All right, before we get into some of our biggest surprises through 10 weeks, let's talk about some of the season betting trends. Unders, 87 and 60. They're hitting at about a 59.2% rate this season. Some of the best against the spread teams, Titans, 7 and 2 against the spread. The Giants also 7 and 2 against the spread. Chargers, Jets, and Cowboys all 6 and 3 against the spread, and only 7 teams have above 500 record against the unders, which is pretty crazy when you look at it. Let's get into some of our biggest Week 10 surprises, though. Jared, I'm coming to you first for this one. Out of all the games, a lot of crazy stuff went on this week. What was your biggest Week 10 surprise?
Well, I think it's more overarching. And I think what I'm starting to learn based off of, the league where it's trending, we're starting to see the running games become a lot more prominent. We're starting to see, usually it's passing, passing, passing. Well, actually, through the first 10 weeks, highest yards per carry in league history and the lowest yards per completion since 1933. And I think defenses are starting to do a better job diagnosing the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, air raid offenses. And I think the shift overall, what we're seeing, defenses are becoming lighter and faster, and it's making more running games a little more prominent this year. You're seeing the Eagles have a great season. You're seeing a lot of other teams leaning more on the power and the counter runs than what we've seen in prior seasons. And I think it's just everything old is new again, right? We had this passing game renovation, and now all of a sudden scoring's down, passing yards, completions down, running game up. So it's kind of, like a seesaw. And that's been, I think, the vibe of the first half. Close games, tight games, lower scoring, unders, underdogs, and the running games of all things becoming a prominent factor in the NFL again.
Yeah, the running game making a huge difference, especially with that Eagles Monday Night Football game. The Commanders did the one thing, they took advantage of the Eagles' one, weakness that they have, which is their run defense, and were able to run out the clock. Had 40 minutes of total possession time, where the Eagles only had around 20 minutes, which was crazy. Tank, your biggest Week 10 surprise? Are you looking at more of a team or a trend?
The Green Bay Packers. We've been talking about the Green
Mm.
Bay Packers this seems for like a month and a half, and somehow, some way, they finally got themselves a dub, and they were able to beat
Aaron
the Dallas
Rodgers.
Yep.
Cowboys while they were at it. It was unbelievable. I mean, we can say Aaron Rodgers, he definitely pulled it off. He had some big explosive plays to Christian Watson, but they also were able to lean on that run game too, and then just turn
Yeah.
over Dak. I mean, the young safety had 2 interceptions. I mean, I think that was just a remarkable game, getting a big win on your home field. I'm not sure it was going to make a difference regards to Packers making the playoffs or anything like that because we saw what the Minnesota Vikings did up in Buffalo. But whenever you plan on the team and everything's just kind of snowballing downhill, it's always good to get a dub, and the Packers were able to do that, so good for them.
I'm still not high on the Packers and Tank. Jared and I talked about the odds for them to make the postseason. I said, talk to me after next week, and maybe I'll be a little bit more on the Packer train, but I'm still down on them, even though they got the win this week. My biggest surprise from week 10 is the Raiders. And I know how bad they are. I really do. But I feel like they've hit a new rock bottom this past week with Jeff Saturday coming in and dominating on Sunday in Vegas. And then Derek Carr coming out in the post-game presser after that game and crying and saying, hey, what some of these guys will do to their bodies to get sleep, to be on the field every day to practice. With the word some, it shows me how divided that locker room probably is right now. And Tank, you're a former player. Like having that locker room chemistry is one of the biggest things. The Raiders hit a new rock bottom with the talent and the players that they have. They should not only have 2 wins on the season, and they should not have lost to Jeff Saturday in the Colts this past Sunday. Don't you agree, Tank?
Yeah, absolutely. It's disappointing for them, especially when you see us in the playoffs last year, and so you bring in a guy like Josh McDaniels that's supposed to take this offense to another level, and you expect when you bring in guys like Chandler Jones that the defense will be able to play up the par, and that you'll be able to be one of the more competitive teams, not only in the AFC but in your own division within the AFC West. And to not be able to do that and actually have one of the worst records in the league, I see why I can be disappointed. And you've heard me on this show, like for the past few weeks, I give the Green Bay Packers hell because they were always like these big favorites, and then they continue to lose. But I also understand how frustrating it could be in that locker room when you just want to win so bad and you can't get a dub. And that's why you see Derek Carr crying on the podium and things like that. So that's why my surprise for this past week was the Green Bay Packers, because even though I can laugh at them and losing 5 games, it's always good when you see a team come together and get a win when a lot of people didn't expect them to. And then you see a team so frustrated like the Raiders where they still can't get out of their own way. They just keep falling down the rabbit hole. So you feel for guys like that, especially when you see the leader of the team crying and they really don't have an answer to all the problems that's just piling on their head right now.
Yeah, they hit rock bottom. Hopefully they'll be able to get a dub eventually. I mean, just to at least give their locker room a little bit of something, right? Let's get into some week 11 key matchups, though. And we're taking it out to Buffalo, boys. Pull out the Doppler radar for this one because it is expected to be 31 inches of snow, which is 1 to 2 feet. This game is going to be like a snowball reincarnated. The Browns are in town. AFC matchup. The Browns haven't won on the road, Jared, since week 1. The Browns have also lost 5 of their last 6 games. They lost last week to the Dolphins. And the Bills also a little bit in uncharted territory. They lost back-to-back games, and Josh Allen dealing with his UCL injury, maybe not at 100% right now. We saw him throw 2 picks in each of the last 2 weeks in the red zone. This is a big game for the Bills. They're laying 8.5 points here at home. Would you feel comfortable with the snow, 31 inches, to take the Bills laying the points, or with all of that uncertainty and the way that the Browns are kind of playing right now, especially, on the defensive side of the ball, could they maybe steal a win here?
I certainly wouldn't put it past them, but the look that we had at this Browns defense off the bye against the Dolphins was pretty bad. The ball did not touch the ground. Like it was like on a string. Tua was locked in. And Buffalo has a similar explosive element to their offense that could do similar things. So that certainly scares me. You're right. The story of this game is absolutely the weather. The problem is we're recording this on a Wednesday. We have no idea what the actual impact of the weather will be. Snow matters. Wind matters more. If it's debilitating snow, obviously things will change. We did see the total drop 4 points. So the market believes the weather will have a major impact on this game. But there's been moments where we've bet weather on Wednesday and on Sunday it's not as bad as we anticipate. So I would caution someone just blindly betting a certain side or total here with the weather being the lone factor. I think Josh Allen's decision-making is certainly a part of the equation with Buffalo going forward. We saw it in the early stages of his career. I recall a game against the Texans in the playoffs where he's like pitching it into the stands. And he's grown up a lot since then. But we're starting to see these flashes, brain farts, where he just doesn't quite give you what you expect from an MVP candidate. And that, I think, is the bigger concern for Buffalo right now. Not the injuries in the secondary. I think Tre'Davious White and Poyer and those guys eventually, Kyer Elam will eventually work their way back and Buffalo will get the full strength in that area. But Josh Allen's decision-making after a game where he kind of blubbed it away, how does he bounce back from that? Weather outstanding. The weather, if the weather's nuts like it was in that Patriots game last year, Monday night with all the wind, I'm not going to read too much into how many yards and points Buffalo scores here. But how does Josh Allen respond from what was a pretty tough loss, at least for the Buffalo fan base? And we'll see how the elbow looks as well. But I think, again, 8.5 with a total of 42.5. Buffalo's going to have to play a pretty good game, and they're going to have to stop the run for Cleveland if they want to cover this number.
Yeah, the Bills need to get their ish together, and Josh Allen does need to get out of his own way because right now he's making those mental errors, Tank. And as a former player, like when you start to make those mental errors, you don't want to keep going down that rabbit hole, right? I mean, the Browns haven't won against the Bills on the road since October of 2009. It's been about 13 years since then. Do you think the Bills laying the points? We know meteorologists are not paid on accuracy, but with the snow coming, can the Bills cover the 8.5 points and Josh Allen get out of his own way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great points when you look at this matchup. I was looking at the AFC East standings. I mean, we do know that Buffalo is third in the AFC now, right?
Yeah.
Like it
Hmm.
happens fast. So Buffalo's third in the AFC East. We have a Cleveland Browns defense that's coming in that the Miami Dolphins didn't have to punt against the last game. So I mean, that shows
Yeah.
how bad they were. At the same time, you have a Josh Allen who, as Jared said, made some dumb mistakes in key moments, and he's supposed to be an MVP caliber quarterback who also has a UCL injury. So I would think that if you have this guy who's injured, he throws the ball 43 times, and you seem to lose a couple of games in a row, you probably want to flip the switch and just try to figure out something totally different to kind of get your season back on track. So to me, you have all those things that happen along with inclement weather. They'll probably lean more heavily on the running game. We had some success from Devin Singletary in the red zone when he was able to score their first two touchdowns. I think they probably place more of an emphasis on running the ball in a bad weather game, try to establish that, limit some of Josh's attempts, make them easy attempts when he does have to throw, and then hopefully get a win against the Cleveland Browns, who's a little bit reeling now coming off that loss to Miami, and then hopefully get your season back on track and then try to make a push to try to take back control of the AFC East. So when I look at it from that standpoint, when you're dealing with weather, the things that the Buffalo Bills are currently dealing with, thinking about how Cleveland wants to come in and kind of slow the pace of this game down and keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Nick Chubb only had 11 carries, 63 yards in the tub. I expect them to
Hmm.
double his carries. Everything to me says that this game should go under the 42 and a half just because it's going to be more of a ball control approach in that weather and just trying to eke out and grind out a win with both of these teams kind of coming in on shaky ground.
The total is at the under 5 out of the last 7 games between these two teams. So also something to keep in mind. And that was without the inclement weather that's coming in. That total has already ticked down 4 points. If you want to get the under, I'd get it now at 42 before it continues to go down throughout the week as snow continues to move in to Buffalo.
I'm
Let's head
seeing
on out a little
41
bit
now on my
further.
screen. So
Wow.
maybe the weather forecast
Get
got
it now,
worse
baby.
in the last few
Get it
hours.
now. Let's head a little bit further south in New York to the Giants. Lions, my Detroit Lions coming into town. The Giants laying 3 points here. That total is set at 45.5. But the Lions, baby, one pride, back-to-back wins against two division rivals the last 2 weeks, the Packers, the Bears, and this week they're going to take on the 7-2 New York Giants, who are really good at performing in clutch moments. All 7 of their wins have been by one score. This is going to be a close game. The Giants don't usually blow anyone out, and the Lions kind of stick around in most of these games. Tank, could you see these guys coming out, the Lions, and covering that 3-point spread? Because I'm kind of thinking it might be a push here where the Giants, win by a field goal.
LJ, you know you're my girl, right? Like we cool. Like we've only known each other for a
Yeah, of
short amount
course.
of time, but
Of
I ride
course.
with you. Um,
We
and I
vibe.
know the Lions are your team. Yeah. I don't know. They're coming in off 2 wins. They beat
Oh, no.
divisional opponents. Now they have to travel to New York. They're facing a Giants team that's playing at home. They came off a bye and they beat the Houston
Yeah.
Texans, solidly, but at the same time they let them kind of hang around for a little bit. I feel like this is a game where the Giants kind of reestablish that they're one of the better teams in the NFC. And with it
Dang
being
it.
45.5 and -3, like I really wouldn't be surprised if the Giants cover here. If you look at it from a standpoint of what Justin Fields was able to do, Daniel Jones ain't that dude. Like we understand that, but he's used his legs a lot this season. I would see him doing that. He threw for 2 touchdowns last week. Saquon Barkley had
Mm-hmm.
152 rushing yards in the tub last week. Houston's really bad against the run. Detroit Lions are also really bad against the one. So what the Giants like to do on the offensive side of the ball pretty much jobs with what you can do against the Detroit Lions. And then if you want to flip the script, I feel like the Giants defense, they're a little susceptible against the run. The Lions can run the ball, but Jared Goff, he's been pretty mediocre this middle part of the season compared to when he was kind of lighting it up the early part of the season, throwing it around. That may be
Mm-hmm.
due to a lot of injuries that they've had with the pass catchers, TJ Hawkinson not being there anymore. I know they get DJ Chark back this week. But that being said, I just feel like this is the time where a lot of the better teams and the guys with the better record seems to kind of rise to the top. And I would expect the New York Giants to do this here and probably go ahead and get themselves a solid win over the Detroit Lions and then push towards some of these divisional matchups that they have with some of their rivals coming up here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we're still cool, Tank. We're still cool because it's really hard for me to see the Lions actually getting a win here in this spot. The Giants, though, I feel like the way, Jared, these two teams play are completely different. Like the Giants have hit the under in 7 of their last 9 games, and the Lions have hit one of the been one of the best teams to the over. They're 6-3 to the over this year. So when you look at a total that's 45.5, can you see the Giants maybe actually scoring a lot of points? Because Daniel Jones was 13 of 17 last week against the Texans.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about the Giants this year, and I think the number matters a lot in this game. I think it opened, the look ahead last week was 3.5. It jumped up to 4. And then when it reopened Sunday night, immediate Lions money bought down to 3.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense if you think about who the Giants are as a team. They're one of the worst teams in the first half this season, scoring just 7.5 points per game. I think only the Colts have a lower first half scoring rate. But then in the second half of games, Brian Dable and Mike Kafka are fantastic. Adjustments, and they are able to scheme their way to a top 5 EPA per play on offense in the second half of games this year. So it's kind of hard for me to consider laying a big number with New York over a field goal because more often than not, they're coming from behind and they're kind of playing this catch-up role. But that being said, this Lions defense scares me, and Saquon Barkley is really feeling it right now. Now he's coming off a 35 carry game. We'll see physically how he responds from that. I mean, but he was unbelievable last week. I mean, it was Saquon left, right, and center. And the Texans just couldn't stop it. And the Lions have struggled to stop the run this year. But I will say this. The Lions defense, I watched that game against Chicago, and I know they gave up a lot of points. Justin Fields was running all over the place. But the Lions defense has a little starch to them. Aiden Hutchinson looks fantastic. He made a couple of plays on the goal line where it was like a crash, like unblocked on a running play off the end, and he came straight down and just lassoed the running back and spun him around. I mean, you don't see defensive linemen make plays. Usually it's the safety that comes down in the box and crashes on the end unblocked. For a defensive lineman to make that kind of play. And again, he's one guy. We'll see what Evan Neal's status is this week. Of course, the right tackle for the Giants missed. He's trending okay. We don't know the injury reports now. We'll see. I think if he plays, I like the Giants a little bit more. But man, this is a tough game to cap because I think at 3.5, I really like the Lions. Because you're right, LJ. This is like 2017 Giants written all over it. At 3, I think it's probably a stay away or a slight bet on the Lions. But I kind of like this Detroit team a little bit. They're a little feisty. And we've been selling the Giants a lot this year because I think they're a little overvalued in the market. If we get a 3.5 at some point this week, I will bet the Lions. If not, it's probably a reluctant pass.
Yeah. Giants 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 games, something to keep in mind. Jared, you mentioned the Colts not being very good in the first half. Well, they're taking on the Eagles this week in Indy, and Indy is licking their wounds after a narrow loss to the Washington Commanders on Monday Night Football. For the Colts, Jeff Saturday, man, and his non-experience as a head coach in either college or the NFL, took advantage of Sunday. He owns the weekend with a win over the Raiders. Jonathan Taylor played really well. And this is Philly's head coach, Nick Sirianni, returning to Indy. He's having a welcome back party, take on the Colts. He was the offensive coordinator from 18 to 20. The Colts just look a little bit rejuvenated, but they still have a lot to prove. I just feel like the Eagles, Tank, are going to be way too much for the Colts here in this spot. The Eagles are laying a little less than a touchdown, 6.5 points.
This is one of those situations where usually you say, okay, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're one of the better teams in the league. They lose a game to a divisional rival on Monday Night Football. This is the perfect bounce back spot to where they kind of show that they're one of the better teams in the league. I remember kind of speaking about that narrative a lot on prior shows. And with the parity in the NFL, it really hasn't panned out that way. I would expect the Eagles to come out here and dominate this game, given that they've played ahead most of the season when they match up against teams, and then they're able to kind of hold on at the very end. But I'm not confident that that's going to happen again this week. I think one thing that the Washington Commanders showed us is that you can run the ball on this Eagles team, especially like if Davis isn't in. I'm not sure what his status is going to be. That's going to be huge because if he's out again, and then you have Jonathan Taylor, who's healthy now, We saw what he did last week. So if he's healthy and they don't have their big studs in the middle of that Eagles defense, then I can see a path to limiting Matt Ryan's attempts and just running the ball down their throat with Jonathan Taylor and keeping this game close. So I think that's one thing we need to do. Just wait and see what the injury report says. I see a path for the Colts, even though everything tells me that the Eagles should be able to bounce back and just have their way with the Indianapolis team that went out and won a game that no one expected them to win against the Las Vegas Raiders. And then they end up running into a brick wall when they face the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor, 147 yards on 22 carries. Incredible last week. Jared, I look at the total. It's set at 44.5. I feel like it could maybe be a good play here, right? It's hit in 5 of Philly's last 6 games. Also 6 of the last 7 Eagles-Colts matchups. And I feel like the Eagles have the 3rd best offense in the NFL right now. But the Colts, they have something cooking, especially if they use a guy like Jonathan Taylor like they did last week.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Jonathan Taylor last week, and the Raiders have a pretty good run defense. I think the key with last week, that game's completely different against the Raiders with Sam Ellinger. And
Yeah.
we thought Matt Ryan was, in purgatory in some alternate dimension.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't think he had any chance of playing. And
I thought he was going to be the offensive coordinator.
He was the offensive coordinator. He was the coordinator of me losing that under, because all of a sudden he's chucking it all over the field and running it. He ripped off a 40-yard run against the Raiders on
Matt
Sunday.
Ryan.
I mean, Matt Ryan. Like, I don't know how. Again, and I think you use the word rejuvenated. I think that's a good word to use. And the question going into the week for the Colts was, how was the locker room going to congeal around Jeff Saturday? Were they going to rally around him, or was it going to be this divide between players that didn't want him in the lineup or as the head coach and players that did? I still am not 100% sure the entire organization, especially the coaching staff like Gus Bradley and those other, veteran coaches on the staff, are fully buying in. But the players certainly seem to buy in. And if Jonathan Taylor's buying in and the offensive line is buying in, I don't see why they can't have success against the Eagles, who are, again, you said it, short week, coming off a game where their defense was on the field for 40 minutes. They did sign Linval Joseph this week. 40 minutes. 40. I'm a man. I'm 40. 40 minutes. Again, short week for them too. So we'll see how they respond from this. And listen, this is a Colts team, and I know the game was really fluky and weird, but they beat the Chiefs in their building earlier this year. And I would put the Chiefs offense ahead of the Eagles offense, especially with Dallas Goedert going to IR. He was one of their top pass catchers. And A.J. Brown's looked a little gimpy over the last couple of weeks. We know he's had these ups and downs with injuries over the course of his career as well. So if you take A.J. Brown less than 100%, you remove Dallas Goedert, you take a defensive line that's susceptible to the run, you put them on the road on a short week after being on the field for 40 minutes against an offense that's starting to run the ball really well, I could see why this number was bet down from 8 to 7 and now 6.5. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see movement towards the Colts throughout the week.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles' 1 weak spot was really, really shown through last week, and it's their run defense. That's how the Commanders were able to get that win against them. And I feel like other teams are going to try to follow suit, especially when you have a guy like Jonathan Taylor on your roster. I mean, watch out, Eagles' run defense.
Rash, too.
They're coming.
Played much this year.
Yeah, they're coming for you. Let's head on out to Minnesota. Cold Minnesota. Cowboys coming into town. They're laying 1.5 here in this spot. It's set, the total set at 47.5. Dallas is coming off of a brutal and frustrating loss to the Packers, but they're still favored here. And I feel like these are teams that had 2 completely different weeks, right? The Cowboys blew a 14-point lead in a defeat filled by a ton of penalties that they just need to not get they need to be a little bit more careful with some of their penalties that they're getting called for. And the Vikings are riding momentum after beating the Buffalo Bills in what was one of the most exciting games I have ever watched. Justin Jefferson was that dude, 4th and 18.
Yeah.
And he kept them in it. At that point of that game, guys, the Vikings only had a 6% chance to win the game, which is crazy. The Cowboys also, similar to the Eagles, haven't figured out how to stop the run either. And now they're facing Delvin Cook, who is having himself a season. Do you think the Cowboys, Tank, on the road can cover 1.5 points?
Wow. This game is hard to figure out actually. This game is hard to figure out as far as who's going to actually win the game and also the total. Because when you look at the way these two teams played last week, you say, oh, easily the over. But then a lot of times I've been in locker rooms, I've been in meeting rooms after you let a team
Mm-hmm.
score a lot of points on you, and then the coaches are just drilling it in your head, practice after practice about the mistakes you made. A lot of times those defenses tighten up. And so when you have both
Mm-hmm.
defenses that gave up a lot of points, maybe this game could trend towards the under, even though my natural reaction is just be like over easy because when you look at it, Dak had 265 pass yards, 3 tubs. Cousins had 357 passing yards a tub. The running backs both had really big games. You look at Justin Jefferson. You already talked about the game. He had like CD Lamb balled out as well. And so you look at this from a standpoint to like if these defenses can slow down the offenses last week, what makes you think that they can slow down these other offenses this week just because of the talent you have on both sides?
Mm-hmm.
So with all that being said, I mean, I can see this going either way. Initially in my notes, I had over, but then I don't know. I think this is something I would just have to kind of sit on and wait till I get a better feel of it. Right now, I probably just kind of stay off of
Mm-hmm.
it, just knowing that more than likely it's just going to be a good game, whether it's high scoring or lower scoring.
Yeah, Jared, I'm coming to you with this one because Dak Prescott, he's looking at a Vikings defense that is 29th in opponent yards per pass attempt. Dak's looking at that and he's like, "Whoo, maybe I could take advantage through the air." Do you think that the Cowboys can bounce back from their loss last week to the Packers? Because they're going to be pissed off coming into this one.
Yeah, the market certainly thinks so.
Mm-hmm.
This game, I would say, has been the most surprising. No, I wouldn't. No, I'll rephrase that. It's been the most like talked about line of the week so far because logic says the Vikings are 8-1. They're winning games in ways that no one could even fathom. Justin
Yeah.
Jefferson's making plays that's making Odell Beckham look pedestrian, which is really hard to do. And yet, the Cowboys, off of an I wouldn't say embarrassing, but very disappointing loss, where you're up 2 scores in the fourth
Mm-hmm.
quarter against a team that can't throw the
Frustrating.
ball down the
I
field,
don't
and
know.
you've
Is
got
it
the
not
number one
embarrassing
pass
though?
rush in the league. A
I
little
mean, we've
bit,
seen what the
sure.
Green Bay offense was doing, and we saw what the Lions defense did to the Green Bay offense, and then you let Aaron
Yes.
Rodgers, Christian
Yeah.
Watson, who couldn't even pinch a ball like all these weeks lead up into this game, and then all of a sudden this dude turns into the next coming of Devontae Adams, where he's actually Steph Currying
Literally.
you in the end zone. Like, come on, dog! Like for real, for real.
I was counting the money like this after that game, Frank, with my Packers 4.5 ticket. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's okay. I was giving it back on the Raiders Colts under, but at least I made a little money on Sunday with that Packers game. But yeah, you absolutely could make the case that it was a very market shifting loss where we view the Dallas defense is like the Mariano Rivera of defenses. They have the 2 closers on the edge with Lawrence and Parsons. And talk about a game script working out perfectly for your skill set. You're up 2 scores in the second half with a Packers banged up offense that can't push the ball down the field, and you've got Mariano Rivera A and B on the edge to get after a 37-year-old quarterback that's basically treating the ball like a hot potato, one of the shortest air yards and time to throw of any quarterback in the league this year. I mean, the script was literally perfect, and it still slipped through their fingers. My point being, you would have expected the market to respond in kind and to flip this line accordingly, but that's not what we're seeing. In fact, I saw it tick up towards Dallas today. So if you believe in this Minnesota story, it kind of reminds me of TCU Texas last week or Georgia Tennessee 2 weeks ago. If you believe in this Viking story, you're running to the window right now to bet them as an underdog at home against that Cowboys team that I just explained had, one of their more embarrassing losses of the season. But for some reason, the market thinks Dallas is better. And blind faith, call it idiocy, whatever, I believe in the market. And I also think the over 2 is very much in play here. Dallas is going to come out with their hair on fire on offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see them really being aggressive, pushing the ball down the field. And the running game's been fantastic. Tony Pollard's number 1 rush yards over expected this year. I mean, give me more of him because Dallas can run the ball and it sets up the pass. And as long as Dak Prescott doesn't throw, boneheaded picks in the red zone, I think Dallas is going to score a ton of points in this game.
The Vikings, I feel like, are also due for a tough loss too. Like every team needs a tough loss in the season. The Vikings haven't had that yet, and Dallas is coming in, like you said, with their hair on fire. They want to bounce back this week after what was, Tank, I agree with you, an embarrassing and frustrating loss for the Dallas Cowboys.
Lauren.
You're up 14 points. Close out the freaking game. You're up 14 points. You're up 2 scores. Make it happen. So they're going to be pissed off coming into this one. I feel like the Vikings, they're due for a little bit of regression at some point. So I'm laying the 1.5 with the Cowboys. And I also really like the over 2, Jared, in this one. Let's take it to some key divisional matchups. We're heading to New England, where the Jets are in town, taking on the New England Patriots. The Pats laying 3 points. The total, all of these totals with the Pats and the Jets are so low, 38.5 in this one. AFC East matchup. It's still crazy to me that the Jets are one of the hottest teams in the NFL. 5 wins in their last 6 games, including week 9 against the Bills. Now, both the Jets and the Pats are coming off of a bye this week. The Pats beat the Colts in week 9. Now they're looking for their 3rd consecutive win. And the Pats beat the Jets back in week 8. The Jets have lost 13 straight to the Patriots. I think that they're going to want to make up some ground here. And I feel like their defense is the way that they're going to be able to do it. Tank, do you feel like the Jets +3 could be a good play, or do you like the Pats laying the points at home?
The Jets +3 or the Pats at home. I'm just looking up something right here where the New England Patriots give up about 18 points a game. The New York Jets are just a little bit behind them, giving up about 20 points a game. What does that give us?
38. Last time I checked with my math skills. Right,
So
Jared?
we're looking at the total at being 38.5.
Yep.
Do we have any weather going on in this game right now? Any weather, or is just your
New
typical
England. Never know.
weather that we have in New England, where it's just going to be cold and probably like light snow? The typical.
Yeah. Maybe a little rainy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know better than us, Tank. You know better than us the weather in New
Yeah.
England.
You know, a cup of coffee up there. I wrecked the Range Rover up there, so I know around what the weather's like around this time of year. On my way to work. So, I mean, this game has underwritten all over it to me. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I look at a Jets defense that's been playing better over the past couple of weeks. You talked about the win that they had over Buffalo. The New England Patriots, before they went to their bye, we saw the way they were shut down a Colts offense, even though it was with Sam Ellinger. We didn't have Matt Ryan in the house. But that being said, I mean, you have this division is pretty close. You have the Jets at number 2 in the AFC East. You have the Patriots that's 5-4. They're in 4th, but I mean, they're only 1 game behind Buffalo right now, so they feel like they're very much in it. So I believe this is going to be a competitive game. I believe it's going to be a game where they play it close to vest. They try to lean on these run games, try to limit the mistakes from their young quarterbacks, and the New York Jets trying to hopefully climb up in the first place. The New England Patriots hopefully trying to get right back into the thick of it. That being said, the way I see both of these teams kind of organizing that game script just tells me that the under is in play. I don't know who wins the game, actually. I know that the Patriots should be favored at home, just given the history between these two teams. But the way that Jared is rocking that blazer over his Jet shirt tells me that, there may be a new sheriff in town. And, hey, actually, I would love to see it. I love the parity that we have in the league right now. Hopefully the Jets can pull it off. I think regardless, it's going to be a competitive game, but it's going to be a low-scoring game. That's the one thing I can almost guarantee.
Jets, Jets. No, the total is low, but Jared, the under to me is also the best look. The Pats' last 2 games have hit the under. The Jets games, their last 4 games have averaged just under 35 total points. Their defense is the reason why they've won a lot of these games, especially with no Breece Hall on the offensive side of things. I feel like maybe they could shut down the Pats. Would you also lean the under here? Or take the contrarian play and take the over?
I don't have a strong feel for the total here. I think the only contrarian vibe is it's dropped so much that it won't take much for it to get over. And these games have been weird. I recall a couple games last year where the Pats put up 50 on the Jets. So they have been under vibes in terms of like the pace, but these games have been funky. And we've also discussed just the absolute dominance New England has had over the Jets. Even though the Jets are having a good season, they still lost and didn't cover against the Patriots a couple of weeks ago. And the Jets are 6-3 against New England straight up. over the last
Wow.
39 games. It's basically, 20 seasons. I mean, that's insane. And there's obviously been a lot of Tom Brady because of that, but there's also been a lot of Mac Jones and Cam Newton over the last 2 seasons as well. And this Robert Saleh-led Jets team just can't get Big Brother off their back. Now, you're right. This is a very different Jets team. We'll see if Zach Wilson's matured at all over his bye week. If he's grown up, maybe they had a bar mitzvah ceremony or something for him. I don't know. Just figure out a way to make better decisions, bud, because your supporting cast is pretty good. And the Jets offense is getting it done despite 50% basically of all of their offense comes on the ground. I mean, in this day and age, it's very rare for that to be the case. The thing that just makes me love this Jets team so much, I get such Darrelle Revis Island vibes from Sauce Gardner. And when you could take away the team's best weapon on the other side, it's very effective. The problem is, who is New England's best weapon? What do you try to scheme out of this Patriots offense? There is no top guy, really. There's no Randy Moss. So it's just a styles make fights kind of game. This line's come down pretty significantly from the opener of 7 over the summer, 4.5 last week, then 3.5, now 3. So the market, again, as usual, likes the Jets. I think at 3, it's a stay away. If it goes back to 3.5, I'd probably consider New York because, again, with a low total game, those points are going to matter. I'm just going to hope my Jets win, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm going to be a fan here. Not a betting game for me. I hope the Jets win. Gang green. I hope we go to the AFC Championship game this year because some guy flipped a coin and said we would. I don't know if you guys saw that. Some guy flipped a coin and predicted the accurate outcome of the first 9 Jets games. Win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. It's incredible. He has the Jets losing this game, by the way. And then losing to the Bears next week and then beating the Bills in 3 weeks. Just putting it out there.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, it's out there in the universe. We'll see. But you talked about
So is this guy Giselle's brother?
I don't know. I hope he is.
Is he a male witch?
Tank, did you hear the thing about Giselle with the jiu-jitsu instructor? How did Lauren not hear it? Lauren, you didn't? Have you read about this?
Oh, I saw the pictures. I saw the pictures on Twitter.
I've seen it now, Jared. You pointed it out to me. Or it was either you or Zeno. One of you guys pointed it out to me.
TMZ. No, it was me. It was yesterday. We talked about it.
TMZ. Giselle got no streaks quick. Yeah, I didn't expect to see out no streaks that quick.
Right?
It happens fast.
It's biatch, Giselle.
Yeah. This coin flipping guy, Giselle's brother, I'm glad that we figured that out. Let's head out to Denver, where the Raiders are in town, taking on the Denver Broncos. And man, the poor Raiders, I feel bad for them. They're a shit show. It's gone from bad to worse. When they lost to the Colts, Derek Carr cried after, said some of the guys are willing to put themselves through anything to play. Shows me the locker room is divided. The team is not in a good place right now. And the Broncos, also not in a good place, but for different reasons. They lost for the 5th time in their last 6 games to the Titans this past week. Denver's offense has been held to 16 points or less in 4 of the last 5 games, and they rank 32nd in the NFL in scoring. They're still favored here by a field goal. Tank, as a former player, when you have a locker room like this that seems to be divided like the Raiders, will a win get that back on track, or does it kind of just keep going south from there?
Wins cure a lot of things in the NFL. I will say that.
Yeah.
So if they're able to get a win somehow, some way, that will change the juju in the locker room. But just going into this game, this has to be the most depressing damn game on the slate. Because when you look at the Denver Broncos, you look at the Denver Broncos and all the flack that Russ has caught, and then they get that win over across the pond, and then it's like, all right, Tennessee is missing all these guys on defense, and you're saying, hey, if there's going to be a chance for Denver's offense to wake up, this is going to be the game, and then they still can't get a dub in Tennessee, and you're like, man, like things are really, really bad for the Broncos. Like everyone's piling on, but then it's even worse for the Raiders. Like I really don't know what to expect. Yeah, I don't know what to expect from these teams. Like because it's one of those things like when you're struggling in ball. I mean, this could be in college, this could be in the NFL. Like when you're in the like like in the thick of training camp and you like, man, I really don't feel like practicing today. A lot of times they'll say you need to get some false enthusiasm. Like sometimes you just have to fake it till you can make it. I don't know where these guys can generate any false enthusiasm right now. If you look at the Raiders, I mean, where do they see any promise on offense? I mean, you've had Devontae Adams making some splash plays here or there, just no consistency in that offense. Josh Jacobs was running the ball down team's throat early in the year. Now I don't know where he's
Mm-hmm.
gone. The defense really hasn't performed up to expectations this season. And then you look at the Broncos, like their bread and butter, the one thing that I assume that they would be able to do, regardless of who in the hell is that quarter. Like even with Drew Lock, you're able to run the ball. Now, how all of a sudden, like with Russell Wilson, like the offensive line really hasn't changed that much between last year and this year, and now all of a sudden you can't run the ball. Like I just don't get it. And so this is a game that's hard to really make out for me. So is this one of those games where you just get a drink and a cocktail and like you see something that's just set on fire and then you
Yeah.
just sip as it just continues to burn? Like I don't want anything. Like I want to get pissed off like betting on Denver or betting on the Raiders and then them doing something stupid and then just making me just get pissed off because why the hell did you bet on this stupid game? So this is a game that you don't put any money on. You just pour yourself a cocktail, kick up your feet, and just enjoy the fire because it's gonna burn, baby,
Yeah.
burn.
Burn, baby, burn. Turn on the fireplace, pour yourself a cocktail, and feel that burn, baby, burn. It is interesting, though. The Raiders have owned this rivalry 7-1 in the last 8 meetings between the two teams. I don't know how this game is going to play out, Jared. Are you betting on this one or are you staying away?
So we've talked about this before in other sports too. You have a handicap. You think that handicap is right. The game plays out in a different way than you foresaw because of extenuating circumstances outside of your handicap. Sometimes the best thing you could do instead of cowering in fear that you got something wrong is to go right back to that handicap again the following week because over time, you tend to be right about these things if you do your homework like we do. I feel that way about the under again this week. We lost on the Raiders under last week. We had no idea Matt Ryan was going to play. Again, he was like in the abyss, the doghouse, getting ready to coach. And then all of a sudden he's on the field starting. Completely changed the tenor of that game against the Raiders. It turned it into more of a passing game. And you saw some late magic, some late big scores. The Colts having the big play late in the game that pushed it over and ended up losing our bet. Well, let's go back to this particular spot again. Same exact number as last week, 42.5, 41.5. Very different situation with Denver's offense compared to Indy's offense. I feel much more bullish about Matt Ryan and a rejuvenated Colts offense than I do about Denver's offense, which looks completely lifeless. And Jerry Jeudy's also hurt. So we're going to go back to the well, same handicap again, because Denver's offense stinks, and I don't think the Raiders on the road this time at altitude are going to have the same success they had against the Colts defense last week. This game to me is a teenager kind of game, 17, 13, 19, 14. That's how I feel vibe-wise here. And let me just give you some numbers on Denver's offense. Somehow, and this almost defies physics. Denver's offense last week had a 9-play drive that spanned 14 yards. Can someone explain that to me? How is that possible? 9 plays, 14 yards.
Hey.
Like you
know
couldn't
how that is
try to do
actually
that.
possible. But the
The only way you can pull that off
out a way
is
to
if you're Mr. Unlimited.
I mean, let's just put it in perspective here. If Denver scored exactly 18 points in regulation of all of their games this season, they would be 8-1. And 18 points is not exactly setting the bar very high for an offense.
Yeah.
If they scored, not anymore, 18 points in regulation of all 9 of their games, they would be 8-1. That tells you how well their defense is playing, which is another reason why I think the under here has a little bit of value. But I can't even come up with any adjectives to describe Denver's offense right now. It's that bad.
Yeah.
One question I have for you, though, because when you look at it, one thing that you felt like you can count on was Denver's defense. How does Nick Westbrook-Akina go 5 receptions, 119 yards, and 2 tubs against that
The
Denver
plays
defense.
he like slipped. I don't know if you watched the flea
Okay,
flicker
I didn't
play.
see it yet. I haven't gone through
Denver
it yet.
corner, like no weather or rain or anything. And that's another thing. Can we get to the Titans? The Titans are like sleeping with the god of luck. Like that game played out so badly for them. Derrick Henry had 53 yards on 19 carries, and they were behind 2 scores, and they still figured out a way to win that game. I mean, the lucky rabbit foot is shoved so far up Mike Vrabel's ass. I don't want to bet against this Titans team right now. We'll get to that game later. But
yeah, we'll get to that game
on
in a
that
little.
play, the one player talking about Westbrook-Akina, like the Denver corner just like slipped. Like he just like fell down and then he was wide open. I can't think of the other play, but one play was like a complete fluke.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, the under is a good way to look. It's 4-0 in the Broncos' last 4 home games. They can't score points, and they keep stopping other teams from scoring points. So that, in my opinion, is a good recipe for an under, guys. Let's take it out to Pittsburgh with the Steelers. Bengals coming into town. Bengals laying 4 points here. Huge AFC North matchup. Week 10, the Steelers came out and delivered against the Saints. And Cincy started, say that 5 times fast, the year with 2 losses. They're now 5-2 since then. And Cincy is probably still missing Jamar Chase this week. The Steelers do have TJ Watt back, and he could put a lot of pressure on a guy like Joe Burrow, force him to get rid of the ball early. And without his top pass catching option, this could be an issue, Tank, but they're still laying 4 points heading into Pittsburgh. How do you feel like this one's going to play out?
I would assume Vegas is expecting Cincinnati to bounce back and avenge that loss from the first game of the season. I understand that TJ Watt is back. I think there's a chance that Minkah Fitzpatrick could be back, even though I thought he was supposed to miss a few weeks with appendectomy, but I thought he may be trying to push to come back for this game. So we'll see. Yeah. So we'll see on that. I think that Cincinnati has enough dogs on offense and able to take advantage of that Pittsburgh defense if this is what they want to do. If they have that mind made up to they're going to reestablish dominance, so that they're one of the better teams in the AFC and go ahead and stomp out a team that really can't do much on offense. I understand Najee Harris had 20-something carries, about 99 rushing yards, but he hasn't looked the same this entire year, battling something that's probably similar to a Liz Frank, something like that. The pass game for the Pittsburgh Steelers really isn't that complicated or competent. I mean, they really haven't had any splash plays that we're accustomed to seeing them. Like my man George Pickens scored a touchdown last week, but it was on a rushing play of all things. So I think when you have Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon finally got off before the bye week in that big game that he had. Who was that against the Carolina Panthers? And then you also have T. Higgins, you have Tyler Boyd. So even without Jamar Chase, they have enough weapons in the pass game to where Joe Burrow should be able to be effective. And if they can just continue to run the ball, then they should be fine. So look at it from that standpoint. Cincinnati doing enough to win the game. Their defense should be able to hold down the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Pittsburgh Steelers defense with TJ Watt should play a little bit better. I would expect the Cincinnati Bengals to win. Is it going to be by more than 4? I don't know if I feel that comfortable just because it's a division game. So maybe I lean under on this one. Yeah, I mean, it seems like the kind of trend that I would probably go with this, probably the under 41.
The under is 3-0-1 in the last 4 meetings in Pittsburgh. Interesting to see. And I know the Steelers won this game in week 1, but it did take 7 sacks and 5 takeaways to be able to do it, Jared. I feel like the Bengals have kind of come together a little bit more. Do you think that maybe they could cover the 4 points here?
I think this spread is probably right. I'm not overly excited to lay in this division. This division historically has been as tight as it gets. This is to me a field goal division. Like it always, and Tank, those Ravens Steelers games back in like the early 2000s, like if you're laying more than a field goal, you're asking for trouble. So I think the spread is right. I think the Bengals win the game. It probably lands right around this number. Maybe since he can open up a little bit of space between themselves and Pittsburgh. You're right.
It wouldn't be surprising to see that.
One.
Yep.
Yeah, like I think the game in week 1 matters. That the divisional games. What did we just see on Monday night? These divisional games are played really close to the vest, And again, this division has been historically close to the best. It is kind of funny, though, because there was a lot of chatter in the bye week for Pittsburgh about Najee Harris and losing some carries to Jaylen Warren, perhaps. And then what do we see on Sunday? Oh, all of a sudden, Najee looks real good, huh? Like, it's funny how that works out when you're in danger of losing your job a little bit. Maybe that ankle doesn't hurt quite as much. Maybe that foot feels a little bit better. And we'll see if he can do that 2 weeks in a row. This Bengals defense, Lou Anarumo, he gets a tip of the cap. And I think last year, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, we kind of overlooked this Bengals defense during that run to the Super Bowl. But I think this is a very good Bengals defense. They've got two bookend ends with Hendrickson and Hubbard. And Kenny Pickett's been sacked 12 times in the last 2 games. So I could see him having some issues up front. And unless Pittsburgh can, establish the run, of course, the Bengals are a little thin in the middle without Larry Ojugbo. I always mispronounce his name, but they've got some issues in the middle, but on the end, they very well could dominate this Steelers offensive line. Mm-hmm. I don't think Chase will play this week. I don't think that'll matter as much. I think Joe Mixon, to me, is left, right, and center here because we kind of saw it last week with the Cowboys defense. Great getting up the field, but when you run at them, especially if Minkah Fitzpatrick is still out, a little susceptible. And I think that's the vibe I get with Joe Mixon here. If you just run at TJ Watt, you kind of mitigate a little bit of that pass rush a little bit. And let's be honest, you need to, because Joe Burrow's basically been a human pincushion over the last couple of seasons. So this total seems relatively high for a divisional game between two defenses that are good. But I think the spread's right here. I wouldn't be shocked if we see 21-17, 24-21. That's kind of the vibe I get in this game.
Yeah, this game was actually supposed to be the Sunday Night Football game, but for the sake of the NFL community, this game between the Chiefs and the Chargers flexed them out. So now we have a Sunday Night Football game between the Chiefs going into LA to take on the Chargers. Chiefs laying 6.5 points. That total is set at 50. Chiefs coming off a win against the Jags. Chargers, who are Jared and I were talking about this, more banged up coming out of their bye week than they were going into it, which I don't know how that happens, that you're more banged up after you have a week of rest. But we watched the Chargers do well on defense against the run, but now Brandon Staley able to get back to what they are good at doing and going up against a pass attack. Travis Kelce, really impressive, but Juju Smith-Schuster been out. He got knocked out with a concussion. He's been in protocol all week. I don't know if he's going to be playing or not. How do you see this game playing out in LA, Tank? The Chiefs laying just under a touchdown. Can they cover that spread?
Well, first I'll talk about Juju. Seeing that game, seeing that hit, seeing the way that he was frozen on his way to the ground, I wouldn't anticipate him playing this week. I mean, I hope everything's okay with him, but he's definitely out at least a week, if not more. He's probably more on that tour protocol based on what all the viewers witnessed in that game last week when he got knocked out. So saying that, I was impressed by the Chargers on Monday Night Football playing the San Francisco 49ers. The way that game, going into that game, I expected the Niners to just dominate. The Chargers go into it banged up. They really don't have a threat on the outside whatsoever. And it seems like everything that the Chargers were bad at, the Niners were good at, yet and still. I mean, that was the thing. When you look at the stats at the end of the game, the Niners ran the ball effectively. Eli Mitchell had himself a decent game. Christian McCaffrey was effective on the run with the run game. Brandon Ayuk had a solid game. But at the same time, the Chargers was just in it from the very end. And for them to be able to play a team with a defense like that competitively in their home stadium, that speaks volumes to me when you have to go back and play a divisional rival that you lost a close game to in their house early in the season. And they should be getting some reinforcements. I don't know for sure. They talked about before the telecast that Mike Williams was working out in the field, that he looked good and that he was pushing hard to try to play this week. So we have to follow his injury status. I'm thinking that more than likely Keenan Allen, hopefully, if he starts practicing this week, he says that when he comes back, he wants to be 100%. He doesn't want to be on a snap count. So if he's practicing this week, trending up to this game, I would expect him to play. So then you give Justin Herbert, Allen, and Mike Williams. One thing we need to track is that Gerald Everett left the game with a groin injury. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to play, but if he does, they still have Trey McKitty and some other guys that could fill in at the tight end spot. So in a sense, the Los Angeles Chargers are getting healthier on offense. the defense showed that they can kind of bow up and kind of shore things up in one of their weaknesses, which is the run game. You don't have to worry about that against the Chiefs because the Chiefs don't run the ball. They're just going to sling it around. So you would like to think that that kind of plays to the Chargers' strength because Khalil Mack is playing solid ball. All that being said, I expect this to be a high-scoring affair if things pan out for the Chargers on offense, and if it continues to trend that way health-wise, and the Chiefs keep doing what they're doing because Patrick Mahomes is playing out of his mind, and even if he doesn't have Juju, Kadarius Toney flash. Travis Kelce is still going to be that dude. MVS left the game and came back with some injuries, but I would expect him to play. Need to see what's going to happen with McCole Hardman, but the Chiefs have so many weapons that you don't really worry about their offense. You don't worry about them scoring. So I think this is just going to be one of the more entertaining games on the slate. A lot of points, and I'm here for it.
Points. Yeah, the over is 7-1 in the Chiefs' last 8 road games. So something to definitely keep in mind. That total is set at 50. Something that Tank said, Jared, is the way that the Chiefs play. They just pass the ball. That's like their style. I know it's going to be a big hit because Juju Smith-Schuster probably going to be out this week. It kind of like plays into the Chargers' defensive scheme where they put 2 deep safeties. They force Mahomes to rely on the short ball. Do you think that maybe the Chargers plus 6.5 could be able to cover the spread here and keep this game close?
Yeah, I like the Chargers in this spot. I mean, they were catching 4 in Kansas City. Why wouldn't I want to take 6.5? I know home, they don't really have a home field, but it's not Arrowhead. Yeah. Let's just leave it at that. Fast track too is also much more advantageous if the Chargers do get some of their weapons back. I agree with Tank's take on the over here. Patrick Mahomes would hit the hot dog guy if he could. He targeted 10 different receivers, 4 different guys caught touchdowns against the Jaguars. He doesn't care. Honestly, it doesn't. I don't think it matters who's playing receiver.
No, he's a hippie, dog. No, he's a hippie. Yeah, he shows love to everybody. Everybody gets the love.
Absolutely. And how good does Kadarius Toney look? Woo! That ankle, that hamstring, whatever was ailing him with Daniel Jones, all of a sudden looks a lot better playing with Patrick Mahomes. It's funny, man. Just rub that dirt on it. Everything's good, Kadarius. You look great.
One other nugget that we need to squeeze in here, too, is Isaiah Pacheco. 16 carries, 82 yards.
Yeah, he's a dude.
The Kansas City Chiefs have a dog at running back if they choose to run it against the Los Angeles Chargers.
They have weapons galore. Now, I think there's a couple of interesting things I noticed in their game against the Jags. First of all, it was kind of a miraculous cover. They were a -3 in turnovers. It was I think the second or third straight week they failed to force a turnover. And they also got hoodwinked. Doug Peterson, that sneaky little dog, with the surprise onside kick to open the game. So 4 extra possessions for the Jaguars in that game, but they still couldn't cover the 9.5. And they were held to just 5.2 yards per play on offense. So Kansas City's defense is percolating, but I think they're much better against the run than the pass. And I don't think the Chargers are going to try to run the ball. And outside of the opening script for LA on Sunday night against San Francisco, they had the lowest success rate and EPA per play of any offense last week. So we need some injection of life into this Chargers offense. I hope it's Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. I mean, for God's sakes, can we get Justin Herbert some weapons? For crying out loud, we are wasting these fantastic years of his with this, banged up Chargers offense around him. And I hope that those 2 guys come back healthy. If Williams and Allen are back and this Chargers offense shows you what they've shown you in previous games against this Chiefs defense, which, oh, by the way, 4-1 against the spread for Mr. Herbert against Mr. Mahomes. Now, one of those games was they were resting a lot of starters. So really 3-1 ATS, but still pretty darn good. And this matchup has given us some fantastic games over the years. And I think the number feels okay to buy. I'd obviously rather have 7, but I think at 6.5, it's still worthy of a play. And I do think the over, especially if you can get it under 50, absolutely an over game. This feels like 31-24-ish, 31-27. Those have kind of been the score lines when these 2 teams have played recently. And I think that's kind of going to be the vibe again this week.
Chargers might get Keenan Allen back, Mike Williams back. I think that's going to make, like you said, Jared, the difference in this game. Without them, though, I don't think they stand a chance. Justin Herbert has no one to throw to. Their offense has nothing going without those 2 guys. Going to be big if true, if those 2 guys are back. Let's shift it to Monday Night Football. 49ers heading down to Arizona, take on the Cardinals. The Niners laying 8 That's a lot of points. The Cardinals last week playing with backup Colt McCoy, and for a part of the game, their third stringer and Trace McSorley, and they beat the reigning Super Bowl champs in the Rams, who aren't really having that great of a season anyway, so it's not really that big of a feat, but good for them. 49ers narrowly beat the Chargers in Sunday Night Football. Defense played extremely well. They limited Herbert to 35 passing yards in the second half. Kyler Murray's status, though, Tank, still questionable for this week. I feel like that's why we're seeing the Niners laying 8 points here. I feel like we'll see that change if Kyler Murray is good to go. Do you think the Niners can cover 8 points, or do you kind of want to see the injury report first and if Kyler Murray is going to be healthy?
Well, you know what we always say, that's a lot of points. And this is a divisional
Yeah,
matchup. And I was actually
a lot of
surprised to
points.
see the Arizona Cardinals debo the Rams how we normally see the San Francisco 49ers debo the Rams. Where James Conner,
Mm-hmm.
had himself a game where he had 21 carries, 69 yards, and 2 rushing tubs. You know, I think this is going to be a competitive game. They're going down to Mexico City actually for this matchup.
Yeah.
So this is going to be our
Oh,
Monday night
yeah, it's
game
in
down in
Mexico
Mexico.
City
Taco
Yeah. So
Tuesday, more like
yeah,
Quesadilla
on
Monday.
a Monday.
yeah. So I mean, that's going to make this game more than interesting. I think it's going to be a great environment. All of that being said, we have +8 for the Cardinals, 43.5 on the total. Man, I think the over may be the play. It just depends. Like you said, if Kyler's back, the over is definitely in play. The thing is that I read something today that said Kyler may be a week or two away. That being
Mm.
said, I mean the offense didn't perform that badly. I mean, my man Nuke Hopkins had 14 targets, 10 receptions, 98 yards. Rondell Moore had 13 targets, 9 receptions, 94 yards. I mean, this is a game where you come into it saying San Francisco should smack that, given everything, Kyler not playing, everything else. But Cardinals able to pull out a win against the Rams, divisional rival. Now they have to go Mexico
Mm-hmm.
City, neutral setting. Hey, they got a chance, but I think more than anything else, if both of these defenses play the way that they should, uh, over. Because if a banged up Chargers offense can do what they did with DeAndre Carter and all these other cats balling out against the San Francisco 49ers, and we expect the Niners to be able to do what they want to on offense, yeah, give me the over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing that makes me a little nervous about the over is how the 49ers defense has been playing a little bit. They haven't allowed more than 16 points in any of their wins this season. But the Cardinals could be able to take advantage here. Their defense has stepped up a little bit since they got whooped. They opened up a can of whoop ass in week 1 against Kansas City. But they actually rank higher in points per game and takeaways per game than the 49ers defense, which is very surprising, something I didn't expect. I saw that stat. I was like, wow. We're taking it down to Mexico City, though, Jared. Do you take, I mean, the Cardinals getting 8 points, depending on, hey, Kyler Murray might come back, getting 8 would be almost a gift.
Yeah, Kyler's status makes this tricky. Let's just operate in Tank's reality for a minute, and let's say Kyler doesn't play. And let's say this line actually goes to like 10-ish. And I don't know for sure how baked in Kyler playing is into this line. That's actually something I probably should have clarified before this show, but I will clarify it before my best bets column drops on Thursday night, because I think that's an important point. And I think that if this does get to 10, I mean, hear me out here, but is Colt McCoy really the worst thing for
He
this
looked good
Cardinals
last
offense right
week.
now? I mean, Rondell Moore might be better. Excuse me, not Rondell Moore. Hollywood Brown, I saw, was designated to return from IR. And, you've got
Oh,
Hopkins playing at a pretty good level right now. I don't know what Hollywood's status is this week, but if he plays and Hopkins is playing and you got the running game going with Connor, and listen, this Niners team hasn't been very efficient. I mean, every single matchup favored them on Sunday night, yet they still kicked 3 field goals inside the 10. And their red zone scoring percentage this year is painfully average for a team that runs it really well. And Tank, I don't know if you agree with this. I've always hypothesized for years that, to me, red zone offense, if you can run the ball in the red zone, way more important than passing it. You can get that
absolutely.
first and goal at the 8, and you could just run it 3 times and not have to throw it into those tight windows. I always say red zone offenses are much more successful when you can run the ball. And from my understanding, the Niners have one of the best running games in the league. Yet, they're still a very average red zone team in terms of their touchdown percentages. And when you want to cover an 8, maybe 10-point spread, you saw what happened when those touchdowns went to field goals. So I could see the Cardinals being a live pooch here if it's McCoy and if this line stretches to double digits. If it's Murray and it goes back to 7 or 6, maybe it lands somewhere in the, that range. I'm probably less bullish on the Cardinals because I actually think the upside for Colt McCoy might not be as high, but the ceiling, the floor I think is higher than Kyler Murray's floor, which when he's not here mentally, that floor is, beneath my basement. I don't even have a basement. So it's basically in hell. So I don't really vibe too much with Kyler Murray right now. And maybe Colt McCoy's the best thing for this Cardinals offense for a couple weeks.
Yeah. Do you guys want to know a fun stat here about the coaches too? Kyle Shanahan, 19, 28, and 1 in his career as a favorite. Cliff Kingsbury is 22, 11, and 2 as an underdog. So maybe want to bet on the Cardinals here and Cliff Kingsbury if the trends are your friend in this spot. But this game's going to be interesting.
Have not done well this year over a touchdown. Favorites over a touchdown are like no bueno this year. It's a parity league.
Tank says it's a lot of points.
And it's a divisional rival. Yeah, divisional rival too. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
Yeah. Before we get into our best bets, let's talk about Superbook Sports for a second because Pickswise Playbook is presented by our friends at Superbook Sports. Pile up the wins, guys, and pile up the money with Superbook. Right now, the best betting app from Las Vegas is giving you free money every week you make a bet. All you have to do is place a $50 bet every week with Superbook, and they'll give you a $5 bonus up to $50 for betting each week afterwards. So if you're in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Nevada, New Jersey, or Tennessee, download the Superbook Sports app or visit superbook.com to get your streak started today. Speaking of streaks, let's talk about our best bets. Tank, coming to you first. Who you got for this week?
Well, they disappointed me when they played earlier this year, and I went with the over. So hopefully they totally redeem themselves this week. I'm going KC at Los Angeles Chargers over 50. We've already talked about it, and I'm hoping that it comes true. I hope we can see both of these teams play each other healthy because that game last time they played earlier this year was so spectacular. So give me a healthy Keenan Allen. Give me my cousin Mike Williams. Like, hopefully my man Joe Everett could come back. Let Austin Eckler do what he does. Give Justin Herbert some weapons so that he can show us that he's the real touchdown Jesus out there on Sundays. Let him throw the pill around the field, and then hopefully we get a competitive game. Hopefully we get a lot of points, and then hopefully the Chargers can just get a win so we can just see these two teams kind of battle each other going down the stretch in this AFC West because as we expected, we thought they'd be one of the better divisions in the league. Chargers have just been ravished by injuries. I just want to see them get healthy. Hopefully both of these teams can be competitive, make the playoffs, and then have an epic match somewhere here in the postseason along with the Bills and everyone else. So that's what I'm just hoping for, all the really good teams that have the flashy players with the flashy cars to make it to the playoffs, to make the NFL playoffs that much more spectacular. So, yeah, give me the over. Start the trend.
Over, baby. Points. Gerard, who do you got for your Week 11 best bet?
Yeah, I really like that over, actually. I will be tailing you on that one, Tank. Probably a 2-unit guy for me. I like it. I think the Chargers are in play, too. I think this might be a 4-unit game. Might be 2 units on the Chargers, 2 units on the over. But my 3-unit whopper of the week is the Cowboys laying a 1.5. And I know this sounds crazy. Jared, what are you talking about? The Vikings are 8-1, and they're a home underdog to the lowly Cowboys, who just blew a 2-touchdown lead to Aaron Rodgers, who's like hallucinating on peyote somewhere in the desert. Yeah, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You know why? I trust the market. In the market, we trust. The market tells me Dallas is better. And also, I don't really love the Vikings' defensive numbers. They're 19th in schedule adjusted efficiency. Dallas is second in that category. I know things didn't go well on the road at Green Bay, but if you were going to ask me who is going to pull the rabbit out of his hat, Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, there's not enough ice in the world for Kirk to do what Aaron Rodgers did on Sunday, which was just completely surprise us. And again, show us, turn back the clock a little bit with one of those vintage performances. Minnesota's won 7 straight games by 1 score. In the NFL, the ball is shaped in a funny way, and it bounces in funny directions. I don't think that is a sustainable way to win games in the NFL, to do it by one score. You have to put some distance between. You have to put your foot on the throat. Minnesota hasn't been able to do that this year, and they're coming off of just the craziest game of the season. I would expect there to be a little bit of emotional letdown for them. And for Dallas, you would expect the bounce back to be the case after what was basically a gift wrap victory, up 2 scores in the fourth quarter against the lowly Packers offense, and you let that game slip through your fingers. So I think emotionally, we're going to start to see a tipping point. And the Vikings, again, you want to talk about Mike Vrabel having the lucky rabbit's foot shoved up his ass. Give some credit to Kevin O'Connell, but 7 straight wins by 1 score. We're going to see some regression there, I think, in the second half. So I'll trust the market, even though the Vikings are going to be a very popular pick this week. I'm sure I'll go contrarian. I'll lay the penny. If you want to go 1.5, I think that's fine on the Cowboys this week.
Yeah, I really do like it too. The Vikings are due for that big loss, and I think that this is going to be that loss for them. My best bet of the day, Eagles, Colts. I'm also taking an over, 44.5. This is Philly's head coach Nick Sirianni's return game to Indy, taking on the Colts, where he was the offensive coordinator there from 18 to 20. They're going to want to bounce back. They're going to be hungry coming into this game. Jalen Hurts, he has the sixth best QBR in the NFL this season. I think he's going to roll in a game like this. And then you look at the Colts. Like I said, they were rejuvenated last week against the Raiders. Maybe it's a new look coach. Maybe it's a new look offensive coordinator. Maybe it was the fact that Matt Ryan started under center. But Jonathan Taylor, man, he's been playing freaking lights out recently. 147 yards and a touchdown on 22 carries. That is the Eagles' one weakness that we saw last week against the Commanders, is their run defense. I feel like the Colts can really take advantage on the ground, and I also feel like the Eagles can roll offensively too. The over is hit in Philly's 5 of their last 6 games. It's gone 5-1 in Philly's last 6 games. Also 6 of the last 7 Eagles-Colts matchups. So Colts have something cooking. Eagles have the 3rd best offense in the NFL. Give me the over 44.5, baby. Points. Let's go. That is it for us. Week 11, Pickswise Playbook. You guys, best of luck with your bets, and we'll see you next week. Run it back for Week 12. Until then, we'll see you.
Okay.